Rain-slicked concrete against her cheek was the final sensation Penelope registered before darkness swallowed her. Collapsing at the feet of Chicago's most dangerous syndicate leader was never part of her desperate escape. Yet when Dominic Russo saw the brutal purple handprints marring her soft, heavy curves, he ignited a bloody underworld war. The freezing October rain felt like glass shattering against Penelope's skin, but the pain of the sun was nothing compared to the agony radiating from her ribs. She was running. Her lungs burned with every ragged inhalation, her chest heaving as she forced her heavy, exhausted body down the desolate alleyway. She was not built for running. Penelope was a woman of soft, plush curves and thick thighs, her body a full-figured landscape that had, until recently, been her own quiet sanctuary. Now it was a canvas of violence. Behind her, the distant screech of tires on wet asphalt spurred her forward. Gregory Mitchell was looking for her. Gregory, a wealthy, connected real estate developer to the outside world, but a sadistic, controlling monster behind closed doors. He had locked her in his Gold Coast apartment for 3 weeks. He had starved her, mocked her weight, and when his cruel words weren't enough to break her spirit, he had used his fists. Tonight, a forgotten unlocked service door had been her only salvation. Penelope's bare feet splashed through oily puddles as she rounded the corner behind the Obsidian, an exclusive, heavily guarded underground club known only to the city's elite. Her vision swam, the neon lights of the city bleeding into a blurry, smeared palette of red and blue. She gripped the rough brick wall to steady herself, her torn, soaking wet nightgown clinging to her trembling form. Suddenly, the heavy steel-reinforced door of the club swung open. Warm, cigar-tinged air spilled into the freezing alley, accompanied by the low, authoritative murmur of men. Penelope froze, pressing her back against the brick. 5 men stepped out into the rain, unbothered by the downpour, as an assistant immediately snapped open a massive black umbrella. In the center of the formation stood a man who seemed to swallow the ambient light around him. Dominic Russo. Even in her terrified, half-conscious state, Penelope recognized the chilling aura of the head of the Russo syndicate. He wore a flawless, charcoal Brioni suit, his broad shoulders and towering height making the armed guards around him look like mere children. His jaw was clenched, his dark, dangerous eyes scanning the alleyway out of sheer predatory habit. Penelope tried to take a step back into the shadows, but her battered ribs protested with a sharp, blinding spike of pain. A whimper escaped her lips. Her knees buckled. The sound was barely louder than the rain, but Dominic's head snapped toward the noise instantly. "Hold," he commanded. His voice was a deep, gravelly rumble that vibrated over the sound of the storm. Penelope tried to push herself up, terrified that she had just stumbled from the hands of an abusive businessman into the crosshairs of a mafia kingpin. But her body had reached its absolute limit. The adrenaline crashed. The world tilted violently on its axis. She stumbled forward, stepping directly into the pool of light cast by the street lamp above them. Dominic's men immediately reached into their tailored coats, drawing suppressed handguns in a synchronized flash of steel. "Stand down," Dominic barked, his hand raising a fraction of an inch. Penelope couldn't stop her. She pitched forward, the wet asphalt rushing up to meet her, but she didn't hit the ground. A pair of strong, unrelenting arms caught her before she could shatter. Dominic knelt in the dirty, rain-slicked alley, cradling her heavy, unconscious form against his pristine suit. He didn't care about the mud. He didn't care about the rain ruining his silk tie. His eyes were locked on the woman in his arms. The tearing of her thin nightgown had exposed her shoulder and the slope of her chest. Dominic's breath hitched, not in disgust, but in a sudden, blinding surge of rage. Mutilating the beautiful, soft expanse of her pale skin were bruises. Dark, angry violet and yellowish-green marks in the distinct shape of a man's fingers gripped her upper arm. As she shifted limply in his hold, the fabric slipped further, revealing brutal, dark contusions wrapping around her thick, plush waist and ribs. She was a gorgeous, full-figured woman, and someone had treated her like a punching bag. "Boss," his right-hand man, Luca, stepped forward, his tone cautious. "Should I call the cleaners? We don't know who she is. She could be a trap." Dominic slowly looked up, and Luca involuntarily took a step back. The look in the boss's eyes was something Luca hadn't seen in a decade, not since Dominic had slaughtered his way to the top of the Chicago underworld. It was pure, unadulterated murder. "Call Dr. Arisov. Tell him to meet us at the penthouse. Now," Dominic growled, sweeping Penelope up into his arms effortlessly, despite her size. He held her against his chest, as if she weighed nothing but air. "But the meeting with the Colombians—" "Cancel it!" Dominic roared, his voice echoing off the brick walls like thunder. He looked down at Penelope's pale face, gently brushing a wet, stray lock of hair from her bruised cheek. The heavy weight of her in his arms felt impossibly right. Something deep within his chest, a dark, dormant, possessive instinct, snapped awake. "Someone is going to die for this," he whispered into the rain. "I'm going to burn this city to the ground until I find out who." Warmth. It was the first thing Penelope registered. A deep, enveloping warmth that smelled of cedar wood, expensive musk, and clean linen. She gasped, her eyes snapping open as panic seized her chest. She expected to see the cold, minimalist walls of Gregory's Gold Coast apartment. She expected the sting of a leather belt or the agonizing grip of his hands on her waist, telling her how disgusting she was, how no one else would ever tolerate a fat, useless pig like her. Instead, she found herself engulfed in a massive, custom-built king bed, wrapped in sheets made of Egyptian cotton, so soft it felt like spun silk. A fire crackled softly in a massive marble fireplace across the room. The space was cavernous, boasting floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering, rain-swept skyline of Chicago. She scrambled backward against the tufted headboard, wincing violently as the movement pulled at her bruised ribs. She realized she was no longer wearing her soaked, torn nightgown. Instead, she was dressed in an oversized, incredibly soft men's dress shirt that comfortably draped over her wide hips and heavy thighs. "Don't move too fast. Dr. Arisov said you have 3 fractured ribs." Penelope froze. The voice came from the shadows near the window. Dominic Russo stepped into the dim light of the room. He had discarded his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and completely covered in dark, intricate tattoos. A heavy Patek Philippe watch caught the firelight on his wrist. He held a glass of water, his dark eyes locked onto her with an intensity that made Penelope's breath catch in her throat. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and trembling. She pulled the thick duvet up to her chin, acutely aware of her size, her vulnerability, and the fact that she was sharing a room with a man who commanded an army of killers. "You are in my home. You're safe," Dominic said, taking a slow, measured step forward. He moved like a predatory cat, silent and deliberately non-threatening, sensing her terror. "I am Dominic. I know who you are," Penelope breathed, shrinking back. "Everyone knows who you are. Please. I didn't mean to trespass. I was just trying to get away. I don't have any money, but I won't cause you any trouble. Just let me go." Dominic stopped at the edge of the bed, placing the glass of water on the mahogany nightstand. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, though a muscle feathered at his sharp jawline. "Let you go? Out into the storm? In your condition?" "I'm fine," she lied, tears prickling her eyes. Dominic let out a low, humorless exhale. "You have cracked ribs, severe dehydration, a mild concussion, and bruises covering your body." He leaned down, placing his large, calloused hands on the mattress on either side of her hips, boxing her in without touching her. "You are not fine, Tesoro." Penelope swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room for an exit. He'll come looking for me. If he finds out I'm here, he'll bring the police. He owns half the precinct. Let him bring the entire police force. Let him bring the National Guard," Dominic murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous velvety pitch. "No one is stepping foot inside this building." He paused, his dark eyes tracking the nervous flutter of her eyelashes. "Who did this to you?" Penelope shook her head, a tear finally escaping and tracing a hot path down her bruised cheek. "You don't understand. He's powerful. He's connected." She looked away in shame, the ingrained verbal abuse echoing in her mind. "And I'm nobody. I'm just a mistake. He told me if I ever left, he would kill me, because nobody else would ever want to look at me anyway." Dominic's hands gripped the mattress so tightly his knuckles turned white. The sheer venom that spiked in his blood was intoxicating. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Penelope hesitantly met his gaze. "The man who told you that is a dead man breathing," Dominic stated, his tone matter-of-fact, completely devoid of exaggeration. It was a promise. "And he is blind. You are the most breathtaking woman I have ever seen." Penelope let out a wet, broken scoff. "Don't lie to me. I know what I look like. I'm heavy. I'm fat." "You are a goddess," Dominic corrected smoothly, his hand lifting to gently, reverently cup her cheek. His thumb brushed just below the bruising, treating her skin like the most fragile porcelain. "Soft, full, perfect. The man who laid his hands on you in anger does not deserve the air he breathes. Tell me his name." Penelope leaned into his touch involuntarily. The warmth of his hand was a stark contrast to the cold brutality she had known for the past year. She looked into Dominic's eyes and saw no pity, no disgust, only a violent, burning devotion that terrified and thrilled her all at once. "Gregory," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Gregory Mitchell." The moment. The name left her lips. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Dominic's hand stilled against her cheek. The soft, gentle demeanor he had been projecting vanished, replaced instantly by the cold, calculating Mafia Boss who ruled the underworld. "Gregory Mitchell," Dominic repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Penelope nodded fearfully. You know him." Dominic stood up slowly, a dark, terrifying smirk playing at the corner of his lips. Gregory Mitchell wasn't just a powerful real estate developer. He was Dominic's primary money launderer. Gregory had been washing millions of syndicate dollars through his luxury high-rises for 3 years. "I know him," Dominic said, turning his back to her and walking toward the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city that he owned. Gregory was on his payroll. Gregory was eating from his table, getting rich off Dominic's protection, while simultaneously locking a beautiful, innocent woman away and beating her to a pulp. The betrayal was twofold, and the punishment would be biblical. "Rest, Penelope," Dominic said, not turning around, though he magically knew her name from the ID his men had found in the alley. "Eat the food my staff brings you. Sleep. Heal." "Where are you going?" she asked, a sudden spike of anxiety hitting her at the thought of him leaving. Dominic glanced over his shoulder, the city lights casting half his face in shadow. "I have a sudden urge to discuss real estate with an associate. When I return, Gregory Mitchell will no longer be a problem for you, or anyone else." The midnight drive to the industrial sector of the South Loop took less than 15 minutes. Dominic's black armored SUV, cutting through the torrential Chicago rain like a matte, finished blade. The destination was an abandoned, sprawling warehouse complex, abutting the river. A dilapidated property Gregory Mitchell had supposedly purchased to renovate into luxury lofts using Russo Syndicate money. Dominic stepped out of the vehicle, his boots splashing into the pooling water. He did not bring an army. He brought only Luca. When a matter was this personal, a crowded room was an insult to the vengeance required. Inside the cavernous, rotting structure, the air smelled of wet concrete and rust. Gregory Mitchell was standing near a makeshift planning table under a string of harsh, battery-powered construction lights, aggressively barking orders into his cell phone. Gregory was a handsome man, in a conventional, polished way, dressed in a custom Tom Ford suit, but his face was currently twisted into a mask of ugly, frantic rage. He was looking for Penelope. "I don't care if she doesn't have a coat. She couldn't have walked far," Gregory screamed into the receiver. "Find the fat bitch before she talks to the cops, or I'll bury you under the foundation of this building." "You seem stressed, Gregory," a voice echoed through the damp, empty warehouse. Gregory whirled around, dropping his phone. The color instantly drained from his face as Dominic Russo stepped into the circle of harsh halogen light. Luca flanked him, shutting the heavy iron door behind them with a definitive, echoing clang that sounded entirely too much like a jail cell locking. "Mr. Russo." "Dominic," Gregory stammered, frantically trying to smooth his tie and his expression. "I wasn't expecting you. The Colombian meeting. I thought you were tied up at the club." "Schedules change," Dominic said, his voice a low, terrifying purr. He walked slowly toward the planning table, his dark eyes fixed on Gregory with the predatory focus of a wolf cornering a bleeding stag. "I found a stray in the alley behind the obsidian tonight. A beautiful, full-figured woman. Curvy. Plump. Absolutely breathtaking. Except for the fact that she was covered in purple handprints." Gregory took a stumbling step backward, his back hitting a concrete pillar. His breathing grew shallow. "Dominic, you don't understand. She's unstable. She's my fiancée, and she's mentally unwell. She ran out into the storm." "I am an expert in a great many things, Gregory," Dominic murmured, stopping mere inches from the terrified real estate developer. "Money laundering, extortion, architecture. But my greatest expertise lies in recognizing the difference between madness and terror. Penelope is terrified, and now so are you. Wait, listen to me, Gregory shrieked, throwing his hands up as Luca unholstered a suppressed firearm. It's not what you think. It's not just about her. She doesn't know what she is. She doesn't know what she owns. Dominic held up a single, gloved hand. Luca paused. Explain. Gregory swallowed hard, sweat pouring down his forehead, despite the freezing temperature of the warehouse. Her biological father. It wasn't the mechanic she grew up thinking it was. Her real father was Archibald Kensington. The Kensington inheritance! Dominic! It's real! Dominic's eyes narrowed. The Kensington estate was a ghost story whispered among Chicago's old money and underground elites. Archibald Kensington was a paranoid billionaire industrialist from the Cold War era who vanished in the 80s, leaving behind rumors of an untraceable fortune. The state finalized the probate 2 weeks ago, Gregory panted, his words spilling out in a desperate rush to save his own life. Penelope is the sole heir. She inherited a defunct property up in Lake Forest, an old, overgrown botanical estate. But that's not the prize. Beneath the property is a fully reinforced subterranean bunker, a massive survivalist compound Archibald built in the 70s. And it is packed, Dominic. $40 million in unregistered bearer bonds, gold bullion, and deed titles. I saw the architectural blueprints. I was marrying her to get the power of attorney. I had to keep her isolated. I had to break her down so she would sign the documents without asking questions. She thinks she's nothing. I made her think she was worthless, so she would hand over the greatest hidden asset in the state. Gregory smiled, a sickening, greedy expression twisting his handsome features. We can split it, Dominic. 40 million. You take 20, I take 20. We make her disappear, and we take the bunker. Dominic stared at the man. He processed the information. The sprawling estate, the hidden underground bunker, the immense generational wealth that rightfully belonged to the soft, gentle woman currently resting in his bed. Penelope was not just a survivor. She was a queen who didn't yet know she wore a crown. 40 million, Dominic repeated softly. Exactly. Gregory laughed nervously. It's a fortune. You beat her, Dominic said, his voice dropping to a glacial, deadened register. You put your hands on her beautiful, perfect body. You bruised her ribs. You starved her. For paper and metal. Gregory's smile vanished. Dominic, it's business. It was a mistake. Dominic didn't even draw his own weapon. He simply nodded to Luca. The suppressed gunshot was a sharp, biting thwip in the cavernous room. Gregory's eyes went wide, a blossoming red circle appearing in the center of his forehead before he crumpled to the dirty concrete floor, his blood pooling into the rainwater. Clean this up, Dominic ordered coldly, turning his back on the corpse. And get a team to Lake Forest. Secure the Kensington estate. No one goes near that bunker until Penelope is ready to claim it. Just as Dominic reached the door, his satellite phone vibrated violently against his ribs. He pulled it out, answering it with a terse, "Speak." "Dominic, you need to return to the penthouse immediately." Dr. Arisov's voice cracked over the background noise was chaotic. The frantic, rhythmic beeping of the medical machinery and the rushing shouts of nurses. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. The fractured ribs caused a delayed pneumothorax. Her right lung has collapsed, and there is internal hemorrhaging. Dominic's blood ran completely cold. The untouchable king of Chicago felt a terror he had never known. "Is she alive?" Barely, Arisov barked, his professional demeanor slipping into acute stress. I've enacted full emergency triage protocols. We've converted the master suite into an intensive care unit. I had to pull surgical equipment from Rush University Medical Center. Her oxygen saturation plummeted to critical levels. If you want to say goodbye, you need to get here now. Keep her breathing, Arisov, or I will end you, Dominic roared, shattering the silence of the warehouse. He sprinted to the SUV, leaving Luca behind. The drive back to the city center was a blur of neon lights and screaming tires, Dominic's heart hammering against his ribs with the force of a battering ram. He had just found her. He had just found the one woman whose softness balanced his brutality, whose heavy, perfect curves he wanted to worship for the rest of his miserable life. He would not let a dead man's lingering violence take her from him. The doors to the private elevator opened directly into Dominic's penthouse, but the space was entirely unrecognizable. The scent of expensive cedar and musk had been entirely obliterated by the harsh, stinging odor of medical-grade iodine, alcohol, and metallic blood. Dominic burst into the master suite and froze. The massive, luxurious room had been transformed into a high-stakes surgical theater. Brilliant, glaring surgical lights had been erected over the custom king bed. Stainless steel trays holding terrifyingly sharp medical instruments were scattered across the mahogany nightstands. At the center of the organized chaos lay Penelope. She looked impossibly pale, her skin practically translucent against the stark white sheets. A tangle of IV lines snaked into her thick, soft arms, pumping saline and heavy sedatives into her bloodstream. An oxygen mask obscured her beautiful face, and a massive, invasive plastic chest tube was protruding from her side, draining dark, frightening fluid into a canister on the floor. The steady, urgent beep, beep, beep of the cardiac monitor was the only sound keeping Dominic anchored to reality. Dr. Arisov, covered in a sterile blue surgical gown that was heavily stained with red, stripped off his latex gloves with a loud snap. He looked exhausted, his forehead shining with sweat under the intense surgical lights. "Dominic," the doctor breathed, stepping away from the bed. "You made it." "Report," Dominic commanded, his voice shaking with an uncharacteristic vulnerability. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Penelope's slow, labored breathing. He walked to the side of the bed, his large hand gently engulfing her cold, limp fingers, entirely uncaring of the blood or the medical tubes. "It was extremely close," Dr. Arisov explained, wiping his brow. The blunt force trauma to her torso was far more severe than the initial examination showed. A splintered bone punctured her pleural cavity. When she fell asleep, the pressure built up, causing a tension pneumothorax. Her heart was being pushed out of alignment by the trapped air and blood. We had to perform an emergency thoracostomy right here on the mattress. "But she is stable," Dominic demanded, his thumb lightly stroking the back of her soft, fleshy hand. "She is in the intensive care phase now," Arisov nodded, gesturing to the complex array of monitors tracking her vital signs. The triage protocol was successful. The tube is relieving the pressure, and we have arrested the internal bleeding. Her oxygen saturation is slowly climbing back to 98%. Because of her physical resilience and her body mass, she actually weathered the shock better than a frailer patient might have. But she needs absolute, uninterrupted rest. She will wake up soon. "Leave us," Dominic ordered quietly. "Boss, she requires constant monitoring." "I will monitor her," Dominic growled, shooting the doctor a glare that promised violence. Leave the equipment. Wait in the guest wing. If a single alarm sounds, you have 3 seconds to get back in here. Otherwise, I want to be alone with her." Arisov nodded briskly, motioning for his 2 assisting nurses to pack up the immediate surgical waste. Within minutes, the room was cleared of medical staff, leaving only the rhythmic hissing of the oxygen machine and the glowing green lines of the heart monitor. Dominic pulled a heavy leather armchair directly to the side of the bed. He sat, refusing to let go of her hand. For hours, he watched the rise and fall of her chest. He watched the violent bruises on her collarbone and vowed to build a fortress around her so high that no man could ever cast a shadow on her again. It was near dawn when the rhythm of her breathing finally hitched. Penelope stirred, a soft, painful groan vibrating behind the plastic oxygen mask. Her eyelashes fluttered, heavy with sedatives, before slowly peeling open. She blinked against the bright lights, her gaze frantically darting around the room until it locked onto Dominic. Immediate panic spiked her heart rate, the monitor beeping faster. She tried to sit up, but the sharp, agonizing pull of the chest tube forced her back down with a muffled cry. "Shh, Tesoro, do not move," Dominic soothed instantly, leaning over her. He carefully reached up and removed the oxygen mask so she could speak, though he kept the nasal cannula in place. "You are safe. You had a medical emergency. A collapsed lung, but my doctors fixed it. You are in my home. You are safe." Penelope stared at him, her chest heaving as she processed the pain, the tubes, and the overwhelming presence of the Mafia Boss sitting beside her. "Gregory," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. "He'll find me." "Gregory Mitchell is dead," Dominic stated, his voice carrying the heavy, undeniable weight of absolute truth. Penelope gasped, her eyes widening in shock. "Dead? You killed him?" "I removed an infection from this city," Dominic corrected smoothly. "He will never hurt you, or anyone else, ever again." He leaned closer, his dark eyes searching hers. "But before he died, Gregory confessed why he was keeping you locked away, why he was trying to break your spirit." Penelope looked confused, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. "Because I'm ugly, because I'm fat and worthless, and he wanted to punish me for—" "Stop," Dominic commanded gently, pressing his fingers to her lips. "Never repeat those words. You are magnificent. Your curves, your softness, your weight, they are a privilege to witness. Gregory broke you down because he was terrified of you. He was terrified of what you own." Penelope frowned, wincing slightly as she shifted. "What I own? I don't own anything." "Your father was Archibald Kensington," Dominic revealed, watching her face closely. "When he passed, the estate went into probate. 2 weeks ago, you legally inherited the entire Kensington portfolio, a massive historical estate in Lake Forest, and beneath it, a reinforced Cold War-era bunker filled with $40 million in untraceable assets. Gregory was trying to force you to sign over the power of attorney. He was beating you for your inheritance." Penelope's breath hitched. The monitor spiked wildly. "A bunker? Millions? That's impossible. I grew up in a trailer park. My dad was a mechanic." "Your adoptive father was a mechanic," Dominic corrected softly. "Your biological father was a billionaire. You are one of the wealthiest women in Chicago, Penelope. You are a queen." She stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed, the tears finally spilling over and tracking through the iodine smeared on her cheeks. The physical pain of her chest tube was nothing compared to the emotional whiplash. She wasn't worthless. She wasn't a burden. She had been a victim of a monstrous, greedy plot. "I don't know anything about estates or bunkers," she whispered, a sob catching in her throat. "I don't know how to protect myself. The men Gregory worked with, the syndicate, they'll come for me now." "No," Dominic said, his voice a low, fierce rumble that vibrated straight through her bones. He stood up, leaning over the intensive care bed, bracing his hands on either side of her pillows. His face was inches from hers, his dark eyes blazing with an obsessive, protective fire. "Let them try to take a single coin from your bunker. Let them try to take a single breath of your air. They will have to go through the entire Russo syndicate to do it. They will have to go through me." He lowered his head, pressing his lips gently against her feverish, tear-stained forehead. It was a seal, a vow. "You are under my protection now," Dominic murmured against her skin, breathing in the scent of her. "You are mine to guard, Penelope. Your wealth, your hidden estate, and most importantly, your beautiful, heavy, perfect body. Rest now, Tesoro. Tomorrow, we claim your empire." Penelope closed her eyes, and for the first time in her entire life, as she lay battered and bruised in a Mafia Boss's intensive care suite, she finally felt completely, undeniably safe. Did the explosive twists of this Mafia romance keep you on the edge of your seat? The drama of hidden inheritances, high-stakes medical emergencies, and dark devotion proves that true power lies in the most unexpected places. If you loved Penelope's journey from a battered captive to a billionaire mafia queen, please like this video, share it with your fellow drama storytelling lovers, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, multi-part audio stories. Hit the bell icon now